The following podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. Like what you hear? Want more of it ad-free, uncensored, and earlier? Sign up today at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and start getting more for as little as $2 a month. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for your main event, where news and opinions on the sport of kings collide. WrestleMedia is proud to present The Wrasslun Show. Welcome to The Wrasslun Show, part of WrestleMedia, where everything is wrestling, and wrestling is everything. I'm at Adam Kota. We want to thank you very much for joining us this week, especially if you are a new listener here at WrestleMedia. Perhaps you met us over the weekend at Chinlock Wrestling in Kingston, Ontario, which was absolutely incredible. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about my experiences at a future date. I wanted to do that with Matt, but he was unavailable this weekend, but that's okay. No worries there. We'll get to that eventually. In the meantime, we've got two incredible interviews for you today. First, we're starting off with RJ City, a pro wrestler, actor, overall fantastic entertainer. We sit down, we talk about all the stuff he's done with CBC, including his Cynical Crafter series. We go back and talk about his time working on the RoboCop series, as well as Splat-A-Lot for all of you who grew up watching YTV up here in the Great White North, and a whole lot more. He's a great interview. And then, if you happen to be one of our Patreon subscribers, well, then you're going to get a very cool aftermath reunion in the second half of our program. If you don't remember, or maybe you're not privy to Sportsnet, where you're listening to this, Jimmy Kortney, former WWE referee, as well as Arda Okal, created this show, which was kind of like one of the first ever pro wrestling post-game shows, at least here in Canada, on television. And Arda has been away from the show for a long time, but Jimmy and Arda were both at Chinlock 5 this weekend in Kingston, and they got together, and most importantly, they got together with us. So for all of you who subscribe to us at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, you're going to get that full interview as well. For those of you listening to us for free, you're still going to get the RJ City interview, and there's always time to sign up for our Patreon service and for you to get more for just a few ducats in the bucket. Of course, if you want to get more for free, you can do so by signing up for our newsletter over at WrestleMedia.ca. Every week, we give you a fresh newsletter with all of the biggest news and stories coming out of WrestleMedia, including interviews just like this one, some exclusive video content, and of course, some contests only available to those who have subscribed to our newsletter. Those of you who signed up with us over the weekend at Chinlock Wrestling will know that you are in our contest, our big draw for tickets to SummerSlam, the biggest WWE show of the summer here in Toronto, Canada. It's going to be a huge event, and now you're in, all because you subscribed to our newsletter. But of course, it wouldn't be WrestleMedia if we just did that. No, we're also giving you an opportunity to win the new Trish and Lita DVD from WWE. That's all part of Women Crush Wrestling, which you can hear every Saturday on our Patreon and every Monday here on WrestleMedia.ca. But you can only win and be a part of that contest if you sign up for our newsletter right now. And if you want to keep up to date with WrestleMedia as it happens, don't forget to subscribe to our social media. Go ahead and like and follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We're out there doing all the social media things so that you can keep up to date with what's happening with WrestleMedia as it happens. All right, enough of the shilling. Let's get into the interviews. We'll start things off with the very entertaining RJ City. So excited to be sitting here with, let's see, wrestler, actor, singer.
On tour, I think covers it all.
RJ City, man, thank you so much for being on WrestleMedia. We really appreciate it. First and foremost, I got to ask you, how do you have time to sleep? It seems like everywhere you go, you're doing something with somebody.
Born out of me not being able to sleep, period. I'll have anxiety and neurosis and say, I'm up all the time. I got to, fill my day. What can I do? So I do those things because I cannot sleep.
So you have anxiety. How are you able to balance that with being a public performer?
Not very well. Sometimes I think it'll be a good outlet, the performing. Turns out, for maybe 5 minutes. I get a good 5 minutes of joy for every 3 hours maybe, so it's not the best ratio, but I'm living it.
I'm being totally serious here when I ask, so what happens when you're in that moment and you're performing, especially if you're in the ring and you have an attack or you just feel like, oh God, this is not good right now, you run out of spoons, what do you do?
The joy is that wrestling is so inherently stupid already that I don't have anxiety about it. I have anxiety about, like, going to a cocktail party, having to speak to someone I don't know for 3 minutes. That's like, oh my God, what do I hope I don't make a fool of myself? Here, it's guaranteed. You know, I will make a fool. I'm wrestling Hornswoggle. He's probably going to kick my ass. You know, that we know. There's a lot of people here. So my anxiety goes, you know what? Your fears are correct, so we're going to take a break.
I'm really glad you and I have already been introduced, so you're not as uncomfortable talking to me today. That's a nice bonus. I wanted to go back to you talking about making a fool of yourself, and I hope you take this the wrong way because I don't mean it when I say this, but you have never been afraid to separate yourself from the pack by doing something that's maybe a bit more comical. Even when you were first starting out, you were part of a tag team called Wild Stallions, right? Which, by the way, hugely over with me. That for what that's worth. But did you always come into it with a mindset of, look, I'm going to separate myself from other guys, or was it just kind of something that you kind of fell into? I
think it's out of necessity. I think you realize, like, I don't want to do the same thing as everybody else, so if they're all going right, out of necessity, I kind of have to go left. Had I been on a show when I first started of all comedians, I may have had to been slightly more serious. Just for the sake of, you know, variety. So that is my goal with that, I guess. And then it hooks, it becomes a part of you, and then you follow your nose, if I may quote a toucan.
And when did you kind of have that realization? Was it very early on? Were you always set on, I'm going to go get the laughs out there? Or were you like, I'm going to be a super serious wrestler, and then you looked around and said, you know what, there's a lot of these guys around. Maybe I ought to do something different. A lot of the time, like, I find wrestling funny, period. Even serious wrestling is kind of stupid. Really. So, I don't know. It was just experimenting and going, oh, well, I did this, and then it just kind of grew, and then I was like, this is just where I'm going. Having said that, we can get serious and get heat and suck people in and whatever when we want to. So to be able to go back and forth when you need, I feel like, is a valuable skill. I've never been able to laugh at any other person's hobbies because I always look in the mirror and say, I enjoy men in their underwear pretending to fight. So there's nothing more dumb than this. I really, even roller derby, you go and you're like, I respect that. There's a lot of work there. This, I don't know. Odd bloated men in dress shirts signing autographs and taking pictures of what they look like 30 years ago. What is this? Like, if you take the wrestling bubble is very tight and thick, and if you have the luxury of popping it for 2 seconds and looking at this in an unbiased perspective, you're just like, what are we doing? So I'm trying to answer that question when I wrestle. What are we doing here? It's very philosophical when you watch an RJ City match. A lot of people don't realize. I'm like the Walt Whitman of professional wrestling. That's a good way to be remembered, I think, for sure. Do you hope to one day be one of these bloated guys in a dress shirt? What's the future hold for RJ? Such anxiety about being bloated and red when I'm older. Some people just have like the reddest faces all the time. They always have like the meat sweats no matter what they do. So barring that, I would like to be as svelte and healthy as possible when I'm older. Do I want to meet people like this? Maybe. I would rather do like a coffee shop tour where we just do light chain in like a bookstore that also serves coffee. I think that would be a more intimate setting to get to know people. It would be nice. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard $1 million idea from RJ City. I'm going to ask a lot of the questions you probably get all the time, but, you know, our listeners may want to know about it. So first things first, some people may be like, RJ City, what do you mean, that craft guy that I see on CBC? So, yeah, tell us about how that whole thing came about. So that's a weird thing. It's called The Cynical Crafter. It's a web series on CBC, and I write it. I'm in it. I think there's 24, 25 episodes so far. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. You can look it up. There's GIFs on Twitter, which is nice. It was born out of frustration that they were like green-lighting a lot of horrible web series I didn't like, DIY lifestyle stuff, and I was pitching it to their Life channel, and I was like, well, this sucks. And somebody said, God, you're so cynical. And I said, all right, there you go, Cynical Crafter. I'll do crafts. And then they were like, okay. And I was like, oh, are you seriously? So we've done them, and it's weird. It's one of those things that
is in a totally different demographic. So there's a lot of old women, if I go to the mall, will recognize me and not know I wrestle. A lot of people will be like, hey, my girlfriend watches this, like, totally independent of me and didn't know that I know you from wrestling, and our kid watches Splat-A-Lot, and they're all like, that's the same guy? That's really creepy. I have a broad reach, I believe is the term.
And that's kind of cool. Like, I know a lot of people might sit there and say, like, oh, God, he's supposed to be a wrestler, but you are really diversifying your portfolio, and that's an important thing to do, especially in the world of entertainment. That's why you're known as Mr. Entertainment out there.
Do you remember when I always am envious of that, maybe from the 20s to the 50s and the 60s, where if you were an actor, you also knew how to sing and tap dance. Like, at a bare minimum, you could sing, like, one good song, and, like, you could tap one number. And I'm like, that was, like, such a weird thing of, like, nobody does, like, a bunch of weird anymore. And I always got nervous about that, like, maybe I should just stick to wrestling. And I'm like, no, like, I can literally do, like, this, that, and the other. And if it fails, like, whatever. We're all going to be dead soon anyway. What difference does it make? So I'm just trying in the limited time we have on this earth.
What a philosopher. I love that philosophy. It's fantastic. And, it's funny because you say that, because I agree with that. I think you're absolutely right. We have to make the most of our time, and you certainly have been doing that with the series and a lot of other stuff that you've been doing. Where did the gigs and the acting come into play? Was that something that you wanted to do before you got into wrestling, or was it vice versa?
It was something I was always doing as, like, a kid, and then when I started wrestling more, it was kind of on the back burner, and then out of nowhere, I ended up doing a movie with Jimmy Hart, who is here and probably has no idea, and then I also did Splat-A-Lot at the exact same time. I was like, wow, so there's this weird period where I was filming Splat-A-Lot, doing the movie, and wrestling on weekends. And I was like, I can do it. Can I swear? This is fine. This is the traditional podcast. This is the halfway point where I go, can I swear? And you're like, of course you can swear. You can say whatever you want. So I was doing it all at the same time, and I was like, I always looked at wrestling similarly to the stuff I was doing. I see very limited difference between doing this and, like, wrestling Hornswoggle and doing Cynical Crafter. Those are, like, pretty much of the same oeuvre. So since it's not, it's not a crazy shift for me. I'm an idiot no matter what I'm doing, and that's the important thing. It's consistency. I
want to come back to Splat-A-Lot, but I want to ask about the movie. Was it Monster Brawl?
It was Monster Brawl. Jimmy Hart's in it as, like, the ring announcer.
I love that movie. It's so schlocky, but that's what makes it great.
Schlock is the word. Oh, my God, it's the epitome of schlock. And, I wonder if he remembers it. But he probably doesn't remember me because I met him while I was dressed as the Wolfman. So I was completely covered in mole hair. So I'll have to, whatever. We'll see. We'll talk later.
I'm going to raise your anxiety right now because I'm going to make you promise me on record here that you will come back and we'll do an entire episode talking about Monster Brawl for our Ropes to Reels podcast where we look at movies and wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. Kortney Rush and I had that idea of, like, having to do a watch-along because she's in it too, and we're like, we should really, like, break this down. I can't remember the last time I really sat, and it's one of those things where it's like, even if it's good, I'm in it, so I hate it. Like, it's not going to make a difference. I can't appreciate it. So, but I think enough time has passed that I can go criticize myself now.
Are you always super critical of all your work?
Yeah, because it's like my work. And my face is on it, and, like, I envy the people who can do and be like, whatever. I'm like, oh, God, good for you. Not that it's perfect. It'll never be perfect, but I want it to be, like, as close to at least what I wanted as possible. So I always try to divorce myself of, like, once it's done, if it's something like Cynical Crafter where I can control and write and have a little control over it, like, it's nice. There's other stuff, like if I'm on Murdoch Mysteries or something, I'm like, listen, like, I'm not in control of what I look like, what I'm saying, what the cuts are, so just, like, don't watch it. Like, if everyone else enjoys it, like, amazing, but it's not I get too invested retroactively. There's no point.
This may be a weird question, but I'm curious. You've done work for American companies and you've done work for Canadian companies. Do you find a difference in working with production companies from America as opposed to Canada?
Not really. I think there's just the business is different in America. There's a lot more smaller things and, like, weird-ass streaming services you haven't heard of, but they're throwing around millions of dollars, and you're like, there's just more money there. I think that's really the biggest... Oh, dear Lord. Are we okay? Is everything wrong? Can I still swear?
Sure can.
That's the biggest thing. There just seems to be a lot more money, and also with more money seems to be people who like to take a lot of meetings for no reason. That is like, that's all. Here in Canada and the United States, let's take a meeting, let's be interested in something, let's never commit to it by the end of the meeting. That's like prime show business.
It's all about the free lunch.
Easily. If you meet at a coffee shop, you're really not getting your investment. So, like, get a latte or something.
As a wrestler and as an actor, you must appreciate a free lunch probably more than most.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare in wrestling. I'm going to be the one who's like, really, I'm pioneering the movement of there should be catering at house shows, there should be catering at indie shows. Like, here's a small message to any wrestling promoter. At bare minimum, buy a case of water for your boys. If you can't keep them fed, at least keep them hydrated. Have a little respect. Just because you're bloated doesn't mean everyone else has to be.
Also wearing dress shirts, signing pictures of themselves, even though they aren't wrestlers.
I've never seen a well-dressed wrestling promoter in my life. I love that. You can always tell when they wear suits, but they only wear them for wrestling shows because they'll be wearing like the same pair of like black Skechers and trying to, everyone thinks these are dress shoes. They're fine.
I want to talk about something from your past that, again, I'm a huge fan of, which is RoboCop. A lot of people don't know that you did the RoboCop series.
I did.
Yeah.
I did do it.
I know.
And it was fun. And, we had a lot of ideas that came out of it. Maybe he becomes a robo-lawyer. Maybe it's a little more of a Law and Order kind of thing. Maybe it's the home life, retired RoboCop when he's adjusting to family life and trying to have sex as a robot and all that kind of thing.
Might be easier for him.
It might be easy, it might be hard, but those are the questions we would explore, and what does it mean to have robot sex? Maybe he moves to Guam was an idea we had. RoboCop in Guam. Same thing, almost like Dog the Bounty Hunter. People were taking ice, and the robot would arrest them. And we had Beth attached, Dog the Bounty Hunter's wife, but then it all fell apart. So,
do you prefer doing dramatic works, or do you like doing comedies more?
I can't think of one dramatic work I've done.
I thought RoboCop was pretty dramatic.
Yeah, but it's also like a robot. Like, everything is inherently stupid, always. Even if it's a drama, it's still a movie, and movies are weird. We're watching people's giant faces on a screen. That's so weird. I guess I prefer comedy because I don't know why I prefer comedy. Maybe it's easier to make people laugh. Maybe I'm afraid of opening myself up. Maybe I'm afraid of being that vulnerable and being taken seriously as an artist. These are questions that I'll answer privately in my journals, and I'll let you know when I do.
The RJ City book, which he'll be signing in 20 years in a dress shirt while he's bloated.
Yeah, also cheaper than Jimmy Corderas' book, so it's a pretty good deal.
I got to ask about how you and David Arquette got hooked up, because everybody wants to know about that. So tell us how that came about.
You can see the genesis of it all on my Twitter. I collected it at the top of my Twitter page. There's a moment, they call it, a collection of tweets chronicling the timeline. He started following me. I believe we had mutual friends, and my friend was like, told David you have to follow this guy. He did. He kept responding to a lot of my tweets, and it was annoying me, so I called him out, and it snowballed from there, and it turned into this. We fought in Hollywood last year, and now he suckered me into teaming with him, and despite my best efforts, we're undefeated.
Can we expect you and David to come back as the new Wild Stallions?
No, we'll be the old Wild Stallions. We'll be older than the new ones. I'll tell you, if anyone knows anything about being washed up thanks to running hard in the 80s, it's David. So maybe he would really be the captain of that team.
I have to ask, doing all the acting work along with the wrestling work, it's opened a lot of different doors for you. What would you say is the weirdest door that's been opened to you in wrestling because of your acting, or in acting because of your wrestling?
I would say the Arquette thing was a pretty unique marriage of I'm somehow uniquely suited for this role. What other things? Oh God, the weirdest one that was perfect was opening for Mick Foley when he did his Hell in the Cell 20 Years tour. That was the coolest thing where I was like, maybe my life has been leading up to this point because this makes a lot of sense. And I may be doing stand-up here in a few minutes. I have no idea. They were like, you can do stand-up. I was like, okay, so let me know. Although it's a horrible place to do it in. So we'll see. And I was looking at my material. I have a whole bit about Tugboat I had to take out because he's fucking here. So that may not be the best idea, but we'll see.
Well, we're sponsoring Tugboat at WrestleMedia today. You can see our backdrop is right there. So because you're here on our program, I think you should do the material here for us, if you can remember even one of the jokes.
My concept was just like, really, he was like the worst Transformer. He believed he was a boat. Like, that's how you knew wrestling was for kids, because this guy said and made the noise of a boat. And we went, okay, he's a boat. He wants to be a boat. Like, he couldn't even be a sailor. We were like, this guy's a boat. Cool, because as a kid, like, you want to be a fire truck. So you're like, I get it. I'm related. I relate to this guy. And I also really appreciate him keeping the nautical thread by going from Tugboat to Typhoon. That's something you don't see anymore. That's a level of nuance.
He got literally swallowed up by the sea.
Yeah, he washed himself ashore in many ways.
Now that brings up my question, which is, who were some of your favorite wrestlers growing up as a kid?
Bobby Heenan, Roddy Piper. I won't say Hulk Hogan, because saying Hulk Hogan is saying, like, I listened to the Beatles. Like, yeah, no Rick Rude's. But, like, Bobby Heenan, I look back and I'm like, if there's any proof that funny can work in wrestling consistently, I mean, he added so much to commentary. Even in WCW, he's the most dreadful segments, but his is on fire. And it's something that's missing. I mean, talk about being serious versus being funny. There's so much serious business in wrestling. He was a common thread of, like, a little levity and brevity.
Did stand-up comedy come natural to you because of what you do, or was it something you had to work at and kind of craft your skills?
Like, both. I feel like stand-up is something you need to work at, and you just... Similar to wrestling, it is the same thing of, like, when you start, like, even if you're talented, you're probably going to suck. So you just have to keep working and, like, take away what doesn't work and try new things, and then you start to build something that you can work with. So it's the process is... shockingly similar.
I have to ask this because there's a lot of people out there who wrestle and they won't be satisfied until they get that contract or they get that moment or they make that...
They'll be even less satisfied. Yeah.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask about, because you're a guy that seems completely happy. And I don't know if it's just that you're putting on a...
You're looking. I always thought, like, obviously when you get in, especially when you're a kid, there's a very clear path of, like, what's success and what's whatever. And, like, the closer I got and, like, getting offers and tryouts and talking to people and getting closer to the sun, you're like, maybe this isn't really where I want to be looking. Because, like, if you told me a year and a half ago I'd be wrestling David Arquette and then teaming with him, I would have no... Like, I'm the guy who will take the interesting offers section of the newspaper. So to me, like, with all my fingers in different places, like, my best plan seems to be to not have a plan and see what happens. Because and listen, if it works for somebody else and they want to do a certain thing that's, like, I guess a typical path, like, amazing, great, like, good for you. I'm not saying you're a bad person. It's just, like, it's not for me. I want to explore and see what else is out there, and that's what I'm doing. But to your statement, I would be equally as unhappy no matter what I'm doing.
Well, I was about to say that I find your words very inspiring until that last part. You kind of buried the lead at that a little bit.
It's an honest. It should inspire you to be like, you know what? Like, it's going to be... We're going to die soon. Let's at least get the Cobb salad. I'm not going to worry about it.
That's a great philosophy. I do love that. I wanted to ask if you've ever been involved in a match where you've been out in the ring and something happened where you immediately had to call an audible and said, like, we're going to run with this because this is some great material that just kind of came to me as a gift.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, as nice as it is to, like, call in the ring and listen to the crowd, when you're planning stuff, you still want to get as close to the mark of where you think they're going to go anyway. It's much more fun. A lot of times I, try to say, like, hey, look, if they cheer for you, if they boo for me, if they cheer for me and they boo you, as long as they're making noise, I kind of don't really care. This is my character. This is my thing. Clearly the conflict is the wrestling match, so our story's easy in that sense. Let's just go with it. And the one thing I'm doing now, which kind of came out of nowhere, is in Buffalo. I was teaming with Gregory Iron, and we lost 3 matches, and wrestling rules dictates we have to feud. And neither of us wanted to. So we asked for the fans' help. We said, listen, we're gonna feud now. We're going to break up. We'd appreciate your help, acting like this is a big deal. And we, insulted each other, pushed each other a little bit, and the crowd exploded. And they're a part of this big feud. And we'll see where that leads. That was a thing where it was like, oh, okay, like, we're being dumb, but, like, you guys are down for it. You want us to be even more idiotic. So we'll see what happens.
Well, you gave them exactly what they wanted, which is when fans come to the show, they want to be the show. They want to be a part of the show.
I always say, like, wrestling is theater, but the fourth wall is including the audience. Like, they're in the show. So they're playing a wonderful... I remember going to sitcoms or, like, sitting in CBC shows, and it's like, let's get some wild shots of people applauding. And, they're applauding nothing, and then they use those shots. And I'm like, well, what if we did that? Let's just see what happens. This is my wrestling version of It's Gary Shandling's show.
That's another question I want to ask. We talked about like some of the wrestlers that you were a fan of growing up. Who are some of your influences in the film, television, entertainment world that kind of influence not just your performances, but what you do in the ring?
Jerry Lewis, huge at like his work, and then like him as a very bizarre person. David Arquette just bought me one of Jerry Lewis's custom-tailored jackets.
What? Get out of here.
Yeah, I was at I get this in a state sale or an auction or something, and he bought himself one too. And there on the inside is just for Jerry Lewis.
Can you guys wear them out to the ring together as your new tag team?
Well, they're for a 70-year-old man, so I don't think that they have the dynamic we're looking for. But certainly, if we'll wear them to lunch before the show. Jerry Lewis, Laurel and Hardy are fantastic. And, yeah, Larry Sanders, Paul Rubens. There's a lot. It's like, what am I not interested in? Who do I not like? So I would say those guys are the top, not David Arquette. I can tell you that. It was not an influence on my career.
Did you watch the new Laurel and Hardy movie?
Yes, I did. I liked it. I thought it was well acted. I mean, it's a biopic, so it's going to have flaws. And they pick a small section of their lives, but I thought the acting was very good. I think it did them justice. And, I think it's generally what you could hope for, and a lot better than whatever they did with the Three Stooges a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that wasn't particularly good.
Also, another terrible... There was a TV movie. It was the Abbott and Costello story. And Roger Corman... No, Harvey Korman. Sorry, I got my Cormans. Harvey Korman was Abbott, and Buddy Hackett was Lou Costello, and it is probably not their story at all, but it needs to be seen.
I kind of want to see Roger Corman in that now, or at least him directing it.
Oh, he would have directed it better, for sure, than whoever they got to direct it.
I want to ask, who, besides yourself, obviously, who's the funniest wrestler out there that nobody knows is hilarious?
Actually, I was just talking about this. Bret Hart is so... funny. Talking to him, having dinner with him, he's dry, as you can imagine. But even those like crazy WCW promos, the El Dandy one, I pulled my groin, they're like amazing. The whole turning on the States deal, he was like on fire, and like not a side of himself that he showed a lot, but he's incredibly, and obviously like Owen was funny, like it's genetic. If I'm pushing for a late comeback into dramedies, it would be for Bret the Hitman Hart.
I'd be right there with you on that one. What's something that you want to do in the future? What's an idea you got brewing right now that maybe you don't think the world is ready for, but God, you want to do it so bad?
The Coffee House Tour sounds like a really good idea. Stuff like that is fun. Some things I'm working on with Arquette, which sound insane. Coffee and Underwear that I host every Sunday morning is just like continues to be weird. I've been doing it for like a year and a half now. So just continuing that I'm allowed to even continue to do this is baffling to me.
Anything in the pipe that you want to talk about? Any projects coming up that we can know about that you can preview or tease a little bit?
No. Absolutely not. Just watch. I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to hashtag big things you.
That's fair enough. Hey, I just thought I'd offer it. That's what you're supposed to do as a podcaster.
I'll tell you this. I have a lot of small to medium things coming up. And set your expectations to a reasonable level and enjoy.
One last question before we wrap things up here. We know you can wrestle. We know you can sing. So give us a timeline for when we'll see a tap dance in the ring.
Oh, God. Well, the problem is that it's too bouncy, and the ring's too soft. I've tried before, going like, how can we do this? I think it would be great, and I've tried it. Actually, last time I worked Dreamer, I took his kendo stick and did a little soft shoe, but it doesn't read. It just looks like I'm stomping. So maybe I'll have to do it coming down the ramp. I have to change shoes unless I have slip-on taps. If anyone is in the slip-on tap dance shoe industry, please get a hold of me.
Could you imagine, like, wrestling boots with tap dance?
They would be great, and they would hurt.
They would hurt a lot. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff, RJ.
You can Google RJ City, and then you see what comes up and follow what you like, and don't follow what you don't like. That's probably the best strategy.
RJ City, we're all going to die soon. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Thank you. We're shaking hands right now, everyone, just so you know. There's a lot of bon hami going on right now.
I had a great time talking with RJ. He's incredible. I hope we can have him back on the show at some point in time. I just had a blast talking with him. You can check out RJ City across Ontario. Like he said, follow him on various social media platforms as well as ours. And you can check RJ City out. Maybe he'll be at one of the shows that we will be a part of as we are on tour all the time here at WrestleMedia. And our next stop is Queen Street Entertainment's live pro wrestling event from Renfrew, Ontario, Saturday, June the 29th. Some incredible talent featured on that show. Cecil Nix, Addie Starr, Shane Saber, Alexia Nicole. We've got TBT as well as the NBA. There's some acronyms there that I can't really go into full detail with. Jesse Mack, Sally, all kinds of great talent are going to be a part of that event. So go and get your tickets for that event and stop by the WrestleMedia booth and say hello. If you are listening to us for free at WrestleMedia.ca, we're going to wrap things up after the break. And if you're one of our Patreon subscribers, stick around. After the break, we've got our exclusive Aftermath reunion with Jimmy Corderas and Arda Ocal. Hey, this is a commercial for patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca, where you can get early access to episodes of your favorite WrestleMedia shows, get full uncut and uncensored versions of your favorite shows, and more. Don't want to hear this commercial on your podcast anymore? Sign up at our main event tier and get these episodes ad-free. Want to hear your own commercial here instead of ours? We've got tiers for that too. Visit patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca and join the WrestleMedia revolution today. That's going to do it for us here at WrestleMedia this week. I want to thank you all for listening. And if you have the opportunity, maybe you're listening to us on iTunes or another platform that allows you to rate and review our show, please do so. We would love it if you could leave us a positive review with a 5-star rating. That would really help us out a lot. Now, if you want to go the extra mile, you could subscribe at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. And for just a few ducats in the bucket each and every single month, you'll get exclusive access to extra content like the Aftermath interview that we had earlier today, or maybe you'll get the episodes earlier if that's your thing. Maybe you want all of our episodes ad-free. Well, those are all options available to you over at our Patreon. Plus, you can get extra bonus content like our Watch Along Wednesday series or our Quick Picks. There's lots of available options for you, so go and check that out, patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca. And share this podcast with a friend, a family member, or a stranger, anyone that you know who loves wrestling and loves hearing people talk about wrestling. That's what we do here on this show. Until next week, thank you again for listening. I'm at Adam Conta, and on behalf of WrestleMedia, you know what to do. Listen, share, subscribe, repeat.
This has been a presentation of WrestleMedia, where everything is wrestling and wrestling is everything.
Here's what you're missing out on right now over at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca.
Art, I really just really quick wanted to...
I just want to say from that, if it were me booking that match, I would have been like, Jimmy, you're main eventing WrestleMania as the ref. And then right at the start of the match, both of them just beat the crap out of him. Like, not even a ref bump. Intentional, like, clothesline, last ride, spear, carry him out on a stretcher, and in comes Kyoto to do the match.
Anybody but Kyoto. Anybody but Kyoto.
Want more? Sign up now at patreon.com/WrestleMedia.ca.